So that brings me to this part of the discussion where we got to take a hard look at LSU and Ole Miss, because that game is also October 12th, one of those games we're looking at. Ole Miss and LSU seems like a play-in game for both of them, right? You win that game, you get to stay in the opportunity to make the tournament. You lose that game, it feels like you're done. You're Michigan, you're USC. So Ole Miss bounces back from its loss to Kentucky, which is bad. It's not good. It's bad. By throttling South Carolina 27-3. The offense was fine, right? It wasn't the light 'em up scoreboard that we've seen previous weeks, but it was fine. We also got to see a 325-pound man score 2 rushing TDs. J.J. Twiggs showing out here. And Lane Kiffin got his 100th win of his head coaching career. But what stuck to me was finally Pete Golden looks like he knows how to call a defense, because Ole Miss forced 2 turnovers, recorded 6 sacks, 10 tackles for loss in the win. That's bad news for you, LSU. That's bad news. The way that I thought that LSU had an opportunity to win this game was going to be Garrett Nussmeier's arm, and maybe Caden can pull another ridiculously great running back performance out of his behind. But without no Harold Perkins on the defense, you're asking Weeks and them to do a lot. You're starting a true freshman out of corner. It just feels like this is going to be Trey Harris going to work on you. Jackson Dart going to work on you. And if you can't stop anybody and you can't score, it's difficult for me to see how LSU is going to win that football game. However, they've got the talent to do it. We know that. We know that they are talented enough to go get a W against Ole Miss, because Kentucky is talented enough to go get a W against Ole Miss. Kentucky did it without a damn offense. Like that it's a fair fight is what it feels like. However, Ole Miss's loss to Kentucky hurts. LSU's loss to USC looks even worse. Okay? Gonna have to figure that one out, because right now, the SEC and the Big Ten are topsy-turvy. That might be the cool part about trying to make the playoff projections happen right now. Who are these teams that are good? At the top and at the bottom of the SEC and the Big Ten. Is there more room for a Big 12 team to make that? Would a Colorado be able to get into that with a win against Kansas State next week? All very good questions. It also has me looking around at the rest of the Big Ten, as it denotes the SEC and who could be in a play-in game. I realize that some of y'all aren't on the Nebraska bandwagon, and you're certainly not drinking the Indiana Kool-Aid, but I'm going to already point you toward October 19th when undefeated Indiana plays a 5-1 Nebraska. And I think that is going to be the most pivotal game of the Matt Rule era, and could be the most pivotal game of the Curt Cignetti era, because Indiana's 6-0, best start they've had since 1967. Also, the win against Northwestern today, where they scored 41, means that they've scored 40 points, I believe, in 5 of their 6 games. They are put up 500 yards of offense for their 3rd straight game and 4 of their first 6. They reached bowl eligibility already, which means that Cignetti got a $250,000 bonus, automatic 1-year extension to his contract. And, of course, Indiana's going bowling if they don't win another game this year. Really great year if you're an Indiana fan. I also am looking at a Nebraska team that is finding ways to grind out a win that could really bring the Indiana hype train to a halt. Have I seen Matt Rule get out coached by Illinois? Yeah. Not necessarily against Rutgers. What I did see against Rutgers was an offense that looked shaky. I mean, Dante Dowdle in them is one thing, right? They can run the ball, but Dylan Raiola hasn't continued to progress like I thought he would, or at least like it seemed like he would. I'm curious if the Nebraska defense doesn't show up against Indiana, what happens then? Because the Nebraska defense was elite against Rutgers today. Black Shirts held Ethan Kaliakmanis, who, by the way, had beaten Nebraska twice at Minnesota, to just 15 of 37 for 136. They put him on his back 4 times. And more importantly, Rutgers was held to 264 total yards, and only 7-8 of those went to Kyle Monaghan on 19 carries. One of the better tailbacks, one of the top 5 tailbacks in all of college football, couldn't do much against that Nebraska Tony White defense. Also, let's add to this that Nebraska picked Kaliakmanis off twice in this game. I'm already looking well forward to what that's going to be and what that means for the future of both Nebraska and Indiana, because now with Michigan being out of this thing with 2 losses, feels like USC out of this thing with 2 losses. We have room now for a third team to join Ohio State and Oregon for what we think is going to be that last real spot for a Big Ten team to get in there in the 12-team playoff, and this could be that game. Based on what we have seen from Nebraska, with their only loss coming to an Illinois team whose only loss is to Penn State, we're in a good spot here, right? Indiana, once again, I'm thinking they got a lot they got to show a lot of people, because they still wear Indiana colors, even if it's Curt Cignetti, that is the head coach, who's done nothing but win. I think it's important to say now that Curt Cignetti has never had a losing season as a head coach. He's been coaching since 2010. For those of y'all that don't know, he also came up on Nick Saban's original Alabama staff as wide receivers coach and recruiting coordinator. So Mark Ingram, his. Julio Jones, his. And then he goes to Elon. He works his way back to James Madison. Last year had them ready to go in a hurry. They were damn near undefeated and yet not eligible to play a bowl because they're a year ahead of schedule. Goes to Indiana and immediately gets them off to winning with Curtis Rourke just dealing. Curtis Rourke is the best quarterback nobody's talking about. Indiana fans know this. I know you know this. And I know that they just played Northwestern today. And they ain't played much of nobody else. But being 6-0 is still being 6-0. And Indiana claims the first bowl eligible spot in college football this year by virtue of when they decided to start playing the schedule. And, what's a bye week to them? I'm excited for what is going to happen for Indiana and, more importantly, for Nebraska. Because I think if Nebraska can get to bowl eligibility before they got to go play Ohio State, it doesn't matter what happens after that. They lose that game, they can still win 8 games, right? Which would be a phenomenal year for Nebraska. But it's also this much closer to perhaps a 9 or 10 win season. A 9 or 10 win season, I think, gets you in the playoff. Probably get you in that 11 or 10 spot, no higher, but it gets you in, right? Especially if Penn State takes a loss to USC. It's not out of reach for you. So I would say take the bye week, figure yourself out, figure out who you got to get healthy, and come up with a damn good game plan to stop Indiana from putting up 40. You do that, you're going to go a long way, okay? I think now is a really good time to start talking about what's next for Tennessee, too. Because Tennessee's got Florida. And Florida just got a really important win against Central Florida. Florida also beat the brakes off of Mississippi State after getting beat by an A&M team that we all think is really good, right? Miami, we think is really good. What happens if Tennessee loses to Florida? Well, they're back to being Tennessee. Not so much that bad, right? For Florida, though, it means that you're probably stuck with the Billy Napier experience for at least the rest of the year. And I'm not sure that's what you want. I think Tennessee is still very much in the playoff conversation. But that game they were going to have against Alabama ain't as shiny as it was because Vanderbilt took that from you. Vanderbilt took the opportunity from you to beat an undefeated Alabama, just as Alabama took the opportunity for Texas to beat an undefeated Georgia. So Tennessee needs to beat Florida by 1,000,000 for us to believe that Tennessee is still Tennessee. Because once it felt like Tennessee started playing real football teams being Oklahoma and Arkansas, the offense is having a hard time moving the ball. And one of the things I kept hearing from Tennessee fans over and over again is, hey, RJ, Josh took his foot off the pedal against Oklahoma. No, that don't pass for me. He didn't want to run it up. Yeah, he did. He just didn't want to lose. Same thing against Arkansas. He took his foot off the gas pedal because he didn't want to lose this game. He knew Nico Iamaleava was still a young quarterback, and he's trying to protect him, and the defense is playing well. And when your defense is playing well, let them win you a game. Difference, though, for Tennessee tonight against Arkansas is it doesn't matter that your defensive line is getting pressure if your wide receivers can't cover. Okay? When they needed to have it, Armstrong was coming up with it. Like it was there for them. I thought Tennessee got to see once and for all what it is like for them to play a good football team who just doesn't turn the ball over. Oklahoma had 3 turnovers on first down by Jackson Arnold. Michael Hawkins comes into the game. It's a different ball game. Imagine starting the game with a guy that doesn't turn the ball over. You get what you had with Taylor Green. So now Tennessee got to figure that part out. They got to figure out why it is they're having a hard time moving the football against talented defensive fronts. Not necessarily talented at the cornerback position, although Connie Walker's on another level. But talented all the same. They got to figure that out, because if they can't move the ball against Florida, we're all going to start ringing the alarm bell, because we don't think that Florida is good. We're still not sure that they're terrible. We're very sure they're not great, but we don't know what they are. And they're coming to Neyland. So we'll see, right? They're coming to the general spot. You come to the general spot, you better come correct. I'm sure that Tennessee fans can't wait to get to that, because Tennessee fans got a special hate in their heart for Florida. Special hate in their heart for Tim Tebow. I'm curious to find out what their get back looks like, because this was a team that wasn't challenged until tonight. And they got challenged by a team that had basically been playing the same sort of football all year. It's just, Josh Heupel said it. I think people didn't really listen when he talked. He said, look, this is a team that is a couple plays away from being undefeated. I know they got the 2 losses, and I know what we think about Oklahoma State now, but they could just as easily be undefeated. Oklahoma was undefeated, and I think the plays that went Oklahoma's way just didn't go Arkansas's way. So now Tennessee got to do some soul searching and find out what it is they believe and why they believe it.